Have you ever wondered why the deepest desires are never spoken out loud? Why the most forbidden obsessions remain locked behind polite smiles, unspoken glances, and restless nights alone? Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." But what happens when the unconscious isn't merely personal? It's drenched in desire, shadowed by longing, and poisoned by the silence of repressed attraction. Most women believe men speak their minds. But they don't. A man rarely confesses the real reasons he obsesses over a woman. He won't tell you about the sleepless nights when her image stalks his imagination. He won't tell you why he can't stop replaying that moment she looked away, detached, graceful, as if she existed in a realm he could never control. In that moment, he became captivated. But he'll hide it beneath logic, achievements, or shallow replacements. Why? Because men fear the depth of their own obsession more than they fear rejection. Jung knew this secret. His writings whisper of it. If you listen between the lines, desire isn't just about possession, it's about projection. The woman who triggers a man's forbidden longing isn't just herself. She becomes the vessel of his anima, the mystical, feminine energy buried in his unconscious since childhood. She's not just the woman he sees. She's the woman he imagines she could be, the woman he wishes he could become whole through. But that illusion is dangerous, and Jung knew it. There is a quote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." Desire does not leave the psyche untouched. It corrodes, it reveals, it destroys illusions, it builds new obsessions. And it always comes with a cost. Some women are aware of this, some are not. But all have lived it. Have you ever noticed how your silence drives him deeper into fixation than your words ever could? Have you ever sensed that his interest isn't about who you really are, but about who he becomes in your presence? It is not you he obsesses over. It's the part of himself he cannot access without you, the echo of his feminine shadow, the locked door of his own vulnerability. This is why Jung warned of unconscious desires, not because they are wrong, but because they own you when you don't own them. And in relationships, this plays out like a silent tragedy. A woman becomes the mirror for a man's hidden wounds. His forbidden desires leak out in subtle gestures, a lingering look, a sudden withdrawal, a clumsy overinvestment in something meaningless, just to avoid the intensity of what he actually feels. When a woman understands this, she gains power, but not the manipulative kind, not the petty control games modern dating preaches. She gains spiritual sovereignty, the kind of presence that doesn't need to chase, explain, or perform. She realizes that her very existence activates deep rivers in a man's psyche that he is not prepared to navigate. Carl Jung's quotes are filled with these warnings and invitations. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. But awakening isn't peaceful at first, it's violent. It tears down the structures of who you thought you were. It burns through illusions of love, attraction, even morality. That's why most men avoid looking inward when desire strikes. It's easier to keep the obsession hidden, suppressed, or acted out in unconscious patterns, and yet the forbidden desires remain, unspoken but alive. Echoes of longing, repeated in every relationship where a man feels drawn to a woman he cannot understand, and therefore cannot control. She becomes the cipher of his shadow, the gatekeeper of his unclaimed soul. What would you think if I told you this isn't just about men? It's about you. The woman listening to this now. The woman who has been both the object of obsession and the subject of her own projections. Have you claimed your power? Or are you still reacting to his desires as if they define you? Are you the mirror or the master of your reflection. The first forbidden echo of desire is this: projection. The secret assignment of one's inner void onto another human being. It is invisible, but you feel it in your gut. When a man stares at you a moment too long, not with lust, but with hunger for something he cannot name, that's projection. And unless you see it clearly, you will become trapped in the role he subconsciously casts you in. But what happens when you refuse to play the role? When you choose to see yourself, not through his eyes, but through your own. That is where real freedom begins. The second forbidden echo of desire lies in possession, not of the body, but of the soul. Carl Jung warned that unconscious desires don't just want love, they want ownership. When a man fixates on a woman as his anima projection, he doesn't realize that he is attempting to possess the parts of himself he has never developed: his tenderness, his vulnerability, his capacity for surrender. But because he cannot claim these aspects directly, he projects them onto her and tries, in vain, to capture them by capturing her. This is why some men become obsessive, controlling, or emotionally unavailable. It's not because they don't feel, it's because they feel too much and don't know how to process it. The longing becomes unbearable. The woman becomes too powerful in his unconscious world, and so he either tries to own her or run from her. Both are attempts to escape the ache of incomplete integration. Most women misunderstand this. They think, if he desired me, why would he pull away? But the truth is more complex. Obsession is not love. It is hunger disguised as romance. It's the ego's desperate attempt to close the gap between the persona, the false self, and the shadow, the hidden self. And the woman becomes the battleground where this inner war plays out. Some women feel this energy intuitively. They sense when a man is not seeing them, but using them to fill a void. And this is where detachment becomes a form of wisdom, not cruelty. The feminine mystic does not reject the man's obsession. She understands it. She lets him experience the ache without rescuing him from it. Because the real rescue is his own inner work, not her compliance. Jung called this process individuation, the lifelong journey of integrating the unconscious into consciousness. It's not for the faint of heart, and it's why most relationships remain surface level. To go deeper means confronting your shadow, and for men, this often involves confronting the way desire has been used to avoid spiritual awakening. Obsession feels like love, but it is often a distraction from true self-discovery. What would you think if I told you that your silence teaches him more than your attention ever could? The woman who knows her worth does not explain herself to a man drowning in projection. She lets him see her detachment as a mirror of his own spiritual immaturity. And in that discomfort, he either evolves or stays stuck. The second forbidden echo of desire is this: soul hunger disguised as romantic fixation. It is the ego's way of saying, if I can possess her, I will never have to face myself. But the wise woman does not become a sacrificial offering to this hunger. She holds her boundaries like a queen guarding the gates of an inner temple. Have you ever been in a relationship where you felt responsible for his emotions, his desires, his confusion? Have you ever twisted yourself into roles that weren't yours just to keep him from falling apart? This is not love. This is unconscious servitude, and it drains you of your feminine power. Carl Jung's words remind us, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But this is the path both men and women must walk if they wish to escape the cycles of obsessive, unhealthy love. The mirror must be held up, not shattered. And the woman who holds it does so with grace, not ego. Men project their unlived lives onto women. Women, in turn, often respond by molding themselves into those projections, believing it will earn love. But this is not sacred union. It is shadow play, and the cost is your soul. There is a third forbidden echo, deeper than the first two. It's not projection, it's not possession, it's the silent regret of never becoming whole, of living a life chasing external relationships instead of doing the inner work of transformation. This is the ache that Carl Jung warned about in his most cryptic quotes, the ache of an unlived life. Imagine this. You're standing at the edge of a man's desire. He's looking at you, but behind his eyes is the ghost of his unclaimed self. You feel the pull, the intoxicating gravity of being the one who could save him from his inner chaos. But you also feel the danger, because if you step into that role, you become part of his avoidance, not his awakening. So you choose a different path. You choose to let him face his longing without offering yourself as the solution. You stand in your own power, knowing that love cannot thrive in the soil of spiritual avoidance. You become not the object of his obsession, but the catalyst of his growth, if he chooses to rise. This is feminine sovereignty, and it is the only cure for unconscious desire. The third forbidden echo of desire is the one no one dares to speak aloud, the longing for transcendence through another human being. Carl Jung warned of this quietly, between the lines of his most intimate writings, because at the deepest level, obsession is not about lust or even love. It is about the hunger for spiritual completion through romantic attachment. The ego believes, if I merge with her, I will finally become whole. But the truth is more dangerous than that. This longing to transcend the limits of the self by merging with another person is one of the most seductive traps of the unconscious mind. It feels like destiny. It feels like fate. It feels like a cosmic calling. But underneath it is a refusal to do the harder, lonelier work. The work of facing your own darkness, your own fragmentation, your own incompleteness. Jung understood this intimately. He called it the temptation of the anima, the urge for a man to see the woman not as a human being, but as the gateway to the parts of himself he has not yet mastered. Her beauty is not just beauty. It's symbolic of his unlived dreams. Her silence is not just silence, it's a mirror of his inability to articulate his emotional depth. Her detachment is not coldness. It's an invitation for him to find inner stability instead of seeking external rescue. But most men don't realize this. Instead, they fall into obsession. They believe, if I lose her, I lose myself. And in a way, they're right, because they have projected so much of their unconscious identity onto the woman that her absence feels like death. But this is not the death of love. It is the death of the illusion that someone else can complete you. Some women sense this immediately. They feel the intensity of the male gaze not as love, but as a kind of spiritual vampirism. It drains them. It wears them down. Because instead of being seen for who they are, they become symbols in a man's inner mythology. They become the muse, the savior, the mother, the lover, the healer. And sometimes all at once. But a woman is not a projection screen for a man's incomplete soul. She is a sovereign being, with her own shadows, her own desires, her own path to walk. And when she understands this, she no longer allows herself to be consumed by someone else's obsession. She chooses to remain whole, even if it means losing the relationship. What would you think if I told you that the most dangerous desire is not lust, but the longing to avoid spiritual loneliness by merging with another person's energy? It sounds romantic. It feels like love. But it is, in fact, a form of spiritual bypassing, a way to avoid the work of becoming who you really are. Have you ever been loved in a way that felt heavy instead of liberating? Have you ever been desired so intensely that it made you feel trapped rather than cherished? This is the forbidden echo of transcendence mistaken for romance. Jung taught that true love begins where projection ends. But for that to happen, both men and women must stand naked before their own psyches. They must peel back the layers of fantasy and ask, who am I without this person? What am I seeking in them that I have not yet found in myself? The answer is never easy. Sometimes it reveals childhood wounds, abandonment, rejection, fear of insignificance. Sometimes it exposes spiritual immaturity, the refusal to sit alone with your thoughts, to face the void without distraction. And sometimes it unearths the deepest truth of all, that the self cannot be completed by another person, only integrated. This is why so many relationships collapse under the weight of unconscious expectation. The woman is asked to play too many roles. The man is asked to be someone he is not yet capable of becoming. Both suffer. Both resent. Both grieve a love that was never really real. It was a shadow play, a dance of unmet needs dressed in the costume of destiny. The woman who knows this holds a dangerous kind of power. She no longer chases validation from a man's attention. She no longer accepts the role of savior or muse. She steps back. She lets him face his longing without trying to fix it. She chooses herself, even if it means he spirals into silence. And in that silence, sometimes he begins to wake up. He starts to see the difference between obsession and love, between projection and truth, between desire and destiny. This is the dark alchemy of self-awareness. It is not gentle. It burns away illusions, but it also sets you free. The fourth forbidden echo buried inside Carl Jung's quotes is the silent addiction to control, disguised as love, masked as care, hidden beneath the surface of romance. This is the desire that no man openly admits to, yet almost all possess in some form. The need to mold, shape, or subtly dominate the emotional reality of another person, especially a woman, in order to preserve the illusion of his own power. Jung wrote, "Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, their love is lacking." But in the private shadows of male psychology, the lines between love and control blur dangerously. Most men do not consciously want to control a woman's spirit. They convince themselves they simply want to protect her, guide her, or keep her safe. But underneath that protective instinct often lies something darker: the fear of losing emotional superiority, the terror of being vulnerable, the panic that if she fully awakens, he might become irrelevant. Some women can feel this energy immediately. They sense when their growth triggers subtle sabotage from the man who claims to love them. He becomes irritable when she sets new boundaries. He withdraws when she starts chasing her own purpose. He punishes her with silence, not out of cruelty, but out of fear, because her empowerment threatens the foundation of his identity. Have you ever noticed how love can become a prison if one person fears the other's evolution? If a man is still ruled by his unconscious ego, her growth feels like abandonment. Her awakening feels like betrayal. Not because she has wronged him, but because she has stopped feeding his illusions. This is why obsession is not always about sexual desire. It's often about energetic possession, an invisible contract that says, "I will love you, but only if you remain who I need you to be." The moment she changes, he feels rejected, not because she left him physically, but because she no longer participates in his fantasy of control. Carl Jung's most piercing insights are not the comfortable ones. They are the dangerous ones, the ones that expose the raw truth behind attraction, that we often choose partners who play roles in our unresolved psychic dramas. The woman becomes the mirror of the man's need for dominance or submission. She becomes the theater for his battle between love and control. But a conscious woman refuses to act in someone else's play. She will not shrink to soothe his ego. She will not abandon her purpose to keep him comfortable. She will not silence her intuition to avoid conflict. She knows that true love honors freedom, not control. Some women stay silent, fearing that if they outgrow the relationship, they will lose the man entirely. But the silence becomes poison. It festers. It breeds resentment. Eventually, the relationship implodes, not because she changed, but because he never prepared himself for the reality of her full power. What would you think if I told you that some men unconsciously fall in love with a woman's potential, only to fear that potential when it begins to manifest? This is the forbidden obsession with keeping her small, wrapped in the comfort of who she was when they first met. But no woman remains static forever. She evolves. She sheds layers. She wakes up. And when she does, the dynamic shifts. If he is conscious, he will rise with her. He will face his own shadows, the parts of himself that crave control because he fears irrelevance. He will learn to love her, not for who she was, but for who she is becoming. If he is unconscious, he will tighten his grip. He will use guilt. He will manipulate through silence. He will pretend to support her while secretly hoping she falters. And when she senses this, she will face the most painful decision of all: to stay and betray herself, or to leave and reclaim her soul. Most women already know the answer, but knowing is not the same as acting. Jung taught that individuation, the process of becoming your true self, is the highest form of spiritual development. And for women, that often means disappointing the men who loved their previous versions. It means walking away from comfort into uncertainty. It means risking loneliness for the sake of integrity. Some women hesitate. They fear the solitude on the other side of liberation. But what they don't realize is that freedom attracts a different kind of man. A man who is not threatened by their evolution, but inspired by it. A man who does not control, but witnesses. A man who understands that love is not about possession, but about presence. This is not the easy path. It is the dangerous path, the one that breaks illusions and leaves no room for false intimacy. But it is the path of wholeness, and the woman who walks it will never again settle for a love that demands her silence. The fifth forbidden echo in Carl Jung's body of work, scattered through his quotes and meditations, is the obsession with the unseen feminine force, the anima. For Jung, the anima was not merely a psychological concept. It was the mysterious, often dangerous, internal woman who lives in the male unconscious. She is his muse, his temptation, his salvation, and his undoing. She is not the woman he dates or marries. She is the woman he imagines. The woman he fears. The woman he can never fully possess because she is a mirror of his own soul. Jung once wrote, "Every man carries within him the eternal image of woman, not the image of this or that particular woman, but a definite feminine image." And here lies the obsession most men cannot speak out loud. The silent, relentless craving for the perfect woman who only exists in the corridors of his psyche. She is not real, but she feels more real than reality. She is the forbidden echo of desire because she reflects his longing for emotional completion, something no external woman can ever provide. Yet most men project her onto living women, unconsciously forcing them into a role they never agreed to play. This is why so many relationships begin with intensity but end in quiet destruction. A man falls in love not with the woman in front of him, but with his own anima, the internal goddess of his unconscious. At first, she seems to match the woman he meets, but over time, cracks appear. She is human, not perfect. She has moods, flaws, desires of her own. And when the real woman no longer aligns with his inner fantasy, he feels betrayed. He accuses her of changing, when in truth it was his illusion that began to shatter. Have you ever felt the weight of someone's projection on your back? The invisible demand to be their fantasy, not your authentic self? This is the burden of many women, the unspoken contract they never signed. To be the healer of a man's wounds. To be the goddess of his dreams. to play the role of the anima, while denying their own complexity and individuality. But this role is unsustainable. Eventually, the woman either rebels or withers. She either reclaims herself or becomes a shell of who she once was. And when she walks away, the man is often left confused, hurt, or even enraged. He accuses her of betrayal, but it is he who betrayed reality by refusing to love the woman and instead clinging to the phantom in his mind. Jung warned that the anima can possess a man if he is not aware of her. She can lead him into obsessive attachments, impossible ideals, and devastating heartbreak. She can make him worship women for their beauty while resenting them for their power. She can trap him in cycles of desire and withdrawal, love and contempt, fascination and fear. Most men do not realize they are in love with their own unconscious feminine. They chase woman after woman, hoping to find the one who matches the anima perfectly. But no woman can. Because the anima is not outside, it is inside. She represents the parts of him he has refused to integrate: his vulnerability, his creativity, his intuition, his capacity for surrender. A conscious man does not demand that a woman fulfill his anima fantasy. He does the inner work. He turns inward. He faces the depths of his own desire and learns to hold space for it without projecting it onto others. Only then can he meet a woman as she is, without forcing her into the cage of his expectation. For women, this knowledge is both painful and liberating. Painful because it explains why so many men fall in love with them, only to slowly withdraw or resent them when reality does not match fantasy. Liberating because it reveals the truth. His obsession is not really about you, it is about his anima, his inner goddess, his unclaimed emotional life. What would you think if I told you that a man's journey to wholeness is incomplete until he meets his anima, not in the face of another woman, but in the mirror of his own soul? This is why feminine empowerment is not about overpowering men. It is about refusing to carry their unconscious projections any longer. It is about standing in your full humanity, even when it means disappointing the fantasies of those who want you to be something else. Some women try to shrink themselves to fit inside the anima mold, hoping it will keep the love alive. But it never does. Because love built on fantasy cannot survive the weight of reality. And the woman who betrays herself to keep a man's illusion intact will eventually resent both him and herself. The real woman is not an echo of his obsession. She is a mirror of his readiness. If he cannot love her as she is, he is not yet whole within himself. And the woman who understands this no longer plays roles. She becomes the witness, not the puppet. The muse of her own life, not the prisoner of his projection. The sixth forbidden echo hidden in Jung's reflections is the obsession with secrecy itself, the magnetic pull toward what is hidden, unsaid, or left in shadow. This is not merely a philosophical idea, it is a primal hunger woven into the psyche of every man and woman. The desire for mystery is not optional. It is built into human consciousness like a secret chord, humming beneath the surface of daily life. Jung knew this intimately. He wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." Why? Because the soul is not soft and safe. It contains terror, longing, guilt, and ecstasy. The shadow parts of us do not ask politely to be seen. They erupt in obsessions, addictions, and attractions we cannot logically explain. And so, men and women alike become haunted by the secret parts of themselves they refuse to confront. The man who becomes obsessed with a woman he cannot have, or with a love he cannot name, is often not obsessed with her at all. He is obsessed with the parts of himself she reflects back at him, the hidden self he is afraid to meet. She becomes the doorway to his own shadow, and yet he keeps the door locked. He fantasizes instead. He chases the image, not the truth. He whispers about desire in silence, but cannot voice it in the light. Have you ever felt that pull? The sense that something within you is aching to be revealed, but you cannot find the words? That your desire is not only about love or connection, but about meeting the depths of who you really are? This is why Jung's psychology is not for the faint of heart. It is not about comfort. It is about confrontation. The confrontation with your true self and with the hidden desires you dare not speak. And this is where so many relationships fail, not because of lack of love, but because of the terror of revelation. Most people do not break up because of incompatibility. They break up because the mirror becomes too clear. One or both partners cannot bear to see the reflection staring back at them. Jung understood that secrecy creates erotic charge. The things left unsaid, the moments of tension, the emotional distance, these are not accidents. They are part of the psychology of desire. When something is forbidden, it becomes magnetic. When something is hidden, it becomes sacred. And so, many men become obsessed, not with women, but with the silence between them. The silent woman becomes a shrine for his projections. Her detachment creates a vacuum, and into that space he pours his longing, his guilt, his hunger. She becomes the canvas for his forbidden fantasies. Because she leaves room for his imagination to roam wild, he becomes addicted not to her body, but to the unspoken emotional mystery she represents. But this creates a dangerous loop. He cannot let go of her because she is the symbol of his unfinished work. The more he avoids facing his own depths, the more he obsesses over hers. And in that obsession, he forgets that she is human, not a symbol, not a siren, not a shadow to project onto. Some women sense this happening. They feel the heat of attention but also the weight of expectation. They become objects of fascination, but not of true intimacy. They are desired for their mystery, not for their truth. And that is why so many women, even when pursued relentlessly, still feel unseen. Have you ever noticed how some men crave women who are distant, unavailable, or emotionally complex? This is not by accident. It is their way of touching the forbidden, the echo of secrecy that lives within them. They are not always aware of it, but they are chasing a deeper experience, the collision with the unconscious, the meeting with their own suppressed needs. Jung believed that the psyche will invent complex desires as a defense against spiritual stagnation. When life becomes too safe, too predictable, the unconscious will create obsession to wake the conscious mind up. That is why desire often feels dangerous. It is meant to disrupt. It is meant to push you into deeper awareness, even if you resist. And so, the man who is obsessed with a woman he cannot possess is really obsessed with a part of himself he has not yet claimed. Her silence forces him to listen to his own inner world. Her distance triggers his need to bridge the gap between ego and soul. Her refusal to explain herself becomes the catalyst for his awakening, if he chooses to see it that way. But most do not. Most fall into despair, confusion, or blame. They think the problem is external. They do not see that the obsession is a mirror, that the secrecy is an invitation. The woman who understands this no longer takes his obsession personally. She knows it is not really about her. It is about his own longing to meet himself in the mirror of mystery. And the woman who lives her life in integrity with this truth does not explain her silence away. She does not soften her mystery to make others comfortable. She remains a reflection, not for manipulation, but for liberation. Because the real power is not in being desired. It is in understanding why. The seventh forbidden echo hidden in Carl Jung's most provocative quotes is the obsession with transcendence, disguised as romantic longing, masked as emotional attachment, but at its core, a desperate desire to escape the limitations of the small self. Jung called it the search for wholeness, but in modern life it often appears as a hunger for another person, a person who will complete the circle, fill the void, quiet the ache. But no one can complete you. And this is where the torment begins. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But few people realize that this privilege demands sacrifice. It requires the death of illusion, the death of fantasy, the death of the ego's shallow cravings. It demands the confrontation with what you project onto others, especially onto the people you desire the most. This is why love, for many, becomes unbearable. It is not love they are afraid of. It is the loss of the self they thought they were. Desire feels dangerous because it dissolves boundaries. Obsession feels addictive because it points towards something larger than life itself. It hints at transcendence, but drags along all the shadows of repression, insecurity, and fear. When a man obsesses over a woman, it is rarely just about her presence. It is about the sensation she awakens in him, the sense of possibility, the glimpse of another dimension. But instead of looking inward, he clings to her as if she is the portal. He forgets that the portal is inside himself. He turns her into an idol because facing his own unconscious feels too terrifying. This is the tragedy of unintegrated desire. It seduces, but it also blinds. Some women have felt this in the silence of midnight, when they realize the man who craves them is not truly seeing them. He is seeing his own unfinished dreams projected onto her body, her voice, her mystery. She becomes a symbol, not a partner. And in that moment, she faces a painful choice. Does she play along with his fantasy? Or does she reclaim her true self, even if it means stepping away from his obsession? The empowered woman chooses the second path. She lets go of being the muse, the siren, the object of forbidden attraction. She chooses to be real, even if it means breaking the spell, because she knows that no man can meet her in truth until he meets himself in wholeness. Have you ever wondered why the most intense relationships often collapse under the weight of their own expectations? Why the couples that feel fated so often crash and burn? It is not because love was lacking. It is because projection was too heavy. The fantasies could not survive the reality of human complexity. And when the fantasy falls apart, many people mistake that for failure. They think the relationship was wrong, when in fact, it was their unconscious longing they refused to integrate. Jung taught that the goal of life is individuation, not perfect romance, not ego-driven success, but the union of all the fragmented parts of the self. When you deny this journey, you will create endless cycles of obsession and regret. You will chase people to fill your voids. You will silence your soul to avoid discomfort. And you will call it love, but it will feel like pain. The path out of this loop is not to abandon desire, but to see it clearly. To realize that every longing you have is a message from your unconscious. Every obsession is a clue to the part of you that remains unmet. When you understand this, you stop blaming others for your emotional storms. You stop chasing people who mirror your wounds. You stop begging for love that is laced with anxiety. Instead, you turn inward. You do the work Jung described in the shadows of his writing, the hard, holy work of becoming conscious. The woman who chooses this path is no longer trapped in other people's projections. She is no longer addicted to being desired by men who cannot handle her depth. She is no longer afraid of solitude, because she knows solitude is the birthplace of sovereignty. And the man who chooses this path stops obsessing over women he cannot possess. He stops fixating on silence and distance, on mystery and allure. He begins to see that the real mystery is his own soul, waiting patiently beneath his patterns of avoidance. When you strip away the layers of projection, what remains is not emptiness, but essence, not fantasy, but freedom. And so the final echo of forbidden desire is this: it is not truly about another person at all. It is about returning to the self you abandoned when you began to believe you were incomplete. In the end, Jung's work is not about theory. It is about transformation. The woman who knows this walks differently. She speaks differently. She no longer trades her sacredness for validation. She no longer accepts love that costs her peace. She is whole, not because a man completed her, but because she chose herself in the mirror of his obsession. And so, when a man cannot speak his desire out loud, when he chokes on his own longing, when he projects his spiritual hunger onto her skin, she does not bend to meet him in his silence. She waits for him to meet himself. Because the woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.